Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Ask Mario, Tips for Summer Training. My name is James Kotecki. I'll be producing the webinar on behalf of Three Ships Media, but this webinar is sponsored by the Rock and Roll Marathon Series, and we're really excited to have Mario Fraioli with us today. As I said, all attendees are in listen-only mode. Please ask your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel by typing them in, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can after we go through today's presentation. So without further ado, let's dive in and get started. I would like to introduce everyone to Mario Fraioli. Mario, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks for having me, James, and good morning or afternoon to those of you who are out there listening, depending where you are. I'm Mario Fraioli, a senior editor at Editor Magazine in San Diego, California, and also author of the official Rock and Roll Guide to Marathon and Half Marathon Training. And last summer, I coached the Costa Rican men's marathon team at the London Olympic Games, and I'm excited to be here today to discuss summer training tips and give some last-minute advice for those of you who are making the final push toward the Rock and Roll Virginia Beach Half Marathon.
Great. So we are absolutely in good hands today as we go through this presentation. As Mario mentioned, this is a presentation that's just ahead of the Virginia Beach Half Marathon. Here's a little motivational picture for everybody who's going to be training in that marathon, who's training for that half marathon, and is preparing to run it on Sunday, September 1st. So Sunday, September 1st, folks, don't forget, that's what we're all here for, and that's what we're all really excited about. So moving on, I just wanted to touch on what we're going to be talking about today in today's webinar. Here's the presentation overview. The webinar is going to be in several sections. We're going to talk about all different aspects of summer training. We're going to talk about matching your training to your experience level. We're going to go into some nutrition strategies, which for the folks that emailed in questions, I know that we've already been getting some questions about that. We're going to talk about the importance of recovery and important tactics to use when you're recovering from different aspects of your training. We're going to go into injury prevention strategies, and finally, of course, warm weather tactics. This is the Virginia Beach Half Marathon we're talking about, of course, and so we want to make sure everybody performs at their best and also stays safe. So without any further ado, I will get right into the presentation. First thing we want to talk about, Mario, is matching training to experience. And the first level of experience, obviously, are beginners, folks who are just starting out, maybe some of the folks who are listening to this webinar, looking for advice on doing their first real race, their first half marathon. How would you recommend that those folks kind of think about matching their training to their experience, Mario?
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone depending on your experience level, as you touched on, and exactly what your goals are going to be for the race. So, you know, those goals are going to vary depending on your experience level. For a beginner, you know, that goal might simply be just to finish. You know, so to match your training to that, you know, your goal is to get, number one, get to the finish line, to enjoy the experience, and, you know, to sort of excite yourself for the next one further down the road. So you want to make sure that as a beginner, you're taking a very gradual approach to training. You know, you're gradually bringing that long run up every week, just by a little bit, not making too many big leaps. You're learning a lot about yourself as a runner. You know, you're experimenting with some of the things we'll talk about later, such as nutrition strategies, your shoes, your gear, your equipment. You know, so it's really the beginning of what will hopefully be, you know, a lifelong process of becoming a runner, running more and more races, and just learning, you know, about yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses and those things that you need to work on as you prepare for your first long race.
Great. Let's go into the next level, obviously, which is folks who are a little bit more intermediate in their training, some folks who've got a few races under their belt. The first, you mentioned beginners are kind of there really to learn about what's going on. These folks have some experience. What would you recommend in terms of their training?
Yeah, an intermediate level runner, as you said, probably has a few races under their belt, maybe a previous half marathon, or, you know, they've run some 5Ks and 10Ks, and they might be moving up for the first time. You know, so they're at the half marathon distance particularly, there are more things that you need to be aware of that you're not at shorter distances, such as nutrition and hydration. So, you know, the key is, you know, at this point, you're fairly confident that you can reach the finish line. You might take a few more risks in your training, sprinkling in some faster workouts, experimenting maybe with some longer long runs, and and more putting yourself in a position to take a couple risks on race day, to either better your time or to hit a time goal.
Great. And it sounds like one of the themes that's emerging, Mario, is you want to make sure that you're matching your training to your experience, because you don't want to necessarily push yourself too far or put yourself in a zone that that kind of gets ahead of the natural course of how people kind of build up their experience levels.
Exactly, and regardless of your experience level, whether you're a total newbie or you're doing this for the 10th time and will be one of those people at the front of the race, when you're training, the key is consistency more than anything else. I think that's the most important training element, regardless of your experience level. You want to be able to train consistently, whether that's 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 6 or 7 for more experienced people, and stay healthy. So it's really trying to find that optimal level of training for yourself. What's the maximum amount of running that you can do in a week that you're still benefiting from, and it's not breaking you down too much. So yeah, really, regardless of your experience level, taking that gradual approach, and then depending on your experience level, deciding what new elements of training you might want to add in there or experiment with. But the key is not doing too much too soon, not doing too much at once, and really realizing that this is a process, and you're taking steps along the way, regardless of whether you're just trying to finish or you're trying to run really fast or compete for a win or an age group placing or whatever it may be.
Well, let's quickly touch on the people who are maybe in that last category and are competing for the win. The experienced folks who've been training for quite some time. You obviously, you've coached folks in the Olympics, so you've obviously coached folks at this level. What do you recommend to them just in terms of overall training?
Overall training, half marathon be interesting. You have some folks who will either be focusing on it, primarily. That's their main race distance. So, they're training. They're training like maybe a 5K, 10K runner, and they move up and race a half marathon on occasion, or they're using a half marathon as sort of a stepping stone for a marathon. So, for more experienced folks, who are trying to match their training to that, obviously finishing the distance isn't a problem. Finishing within a certain time usually isn't a problem, but the more that you're trying to squeeze those extra seconds or a few more minutes out of your time, you're trying to improve. It's really dotting your I's and crossing your T's as far as the little things are concerned. Making sure that you're staying healthy just like everyone else, but you're focusing on your warm up, your nutrition, you're making sure that you're getting enough sleep at night. You're tweaking your workouts in such a way that they're geared toward cutting some time off. So it's really at that level, it's like all the big things kind of take care of themselves, but it's really paying a little bit closer attention to the details.
Great. We're going to move on to the next topic now, which is nutrition. And in nutrition, we actually had a number of folks who, when we took our poll question at the beginning of this webinar, said that they were really interested in nutrition strategies for marathons and half marathons. So Mario, let's get right into this. The morning of the race, I wake up, I'm ready to run. What should I be eating?
It's going to vary depending on who you are and maybe your dietary restrictions. The thing about nutrition and race fueling is it's really not an exact science. Regardless of who you are, it's really a trial and error type of thing, and finding out, what works for you as a pre-race meal the night before, what works for you as far as breakfast on race day, and what works for you during the race as far as what you choose to eat and drink. So the morning of the race, my general guidelines are to keep it simple. You want to ingest a couple hundred calories, depending on who you are and your size and your nutritional needs. But general rule is anywhere between, say, 200 and 600 calories of easily digestible carbohydrates. We have a bagel up on the screen. That's a popular choice for many people. For some others, it may sit a little more densely, but something simple such as toast, and I like to do a couple slices of toast and peanut butter and a banana. That's just me. I know others who can scramble 2 eggs and have a cup of coffee, and they're okay. So it's really finding through experimentation before your long runs leading up to the race, what you can digest quickly, what fits well in your stomach, making sure that you're not doing anything different on race day that you haven't done in training. The last thing that you want is to be on the start line having to run to the bathroom because you ate something that didn't agree with you on race morning. So try out a variety of different things throughout the course of your training cycle, and take notes and try to find the things that work for you. But very generally, lay off of heavy fats and heavy proteins, easily digestible carbohydrates. 200 to 600 calories. You want to make sure you're still sipping on water. If you're a coffee drinker and you normally drink coffee before a run, that's okay. But if it's not something you normally do, I would avoid that on race morning. But the key is just finding what works for you and sticking to that routine on race day.
And Mario, what's the craziest thing you've ever heard of somebody eating on the morning of a race?
Before the 1979 Boston Marathon, I believe, a gentleman who finished fourth was a guy by the name of Tom Fleming, and to psych out his opponents on the start line about 15 minutes before the gun went off, he threw down a couple of donuts right in front of everyone. And obviously I wouldn't recommend that for most people, but it worked just fine for him on that day. It didn't seem to cause him any trouble, but generally I think that's something most people would want to avoid on race day.
Definitely. Let's get into the during the race part. How to keep your body fueled actually during the event. We've obviously got one example of that listed here or pictured here on the screen. But what do you find are the most effective things that people kind of do nutritionally during the race, Mario?
Yeah, again, it varies. I mean, we have gels pictured on the screen, and those are what most people think of when they think of race fueling because they're easy to carry. They're not very big, and they do give you 100 or so calories very quickly, but it's going to depend on how long you're out there. Those at the front of the field who are finishing the race in, say, a little over an hour, or even those age groupers who are taking up to an hour and a half, you really don't need a whole lot. You might, especially on a warm day like most will face in Virginia Beach, you definitely want to hydrate and make sure that you're drinking regularly at aid stations, but they may not take anything as far as actual solid food or gels, mainly because, one, they're only out there an hour and a half, so their energy needs aren't as great, and two, if it's warmer, your stomach's going to be a lot more sensitive. So, it really depends on how long you're out there and then also the conditions of the day. It's always harder to throw something down on a warmer day than it is when it's cool out. But generally, gels are, as I said, they're convenient, they're easy to carry, but the consistency doesn't always work for everyone. Some people it really bothers their stomach, but again, that's something you want to learn in practice before the race. Sports drinks along the course will offer you some calories, but also will help you rehydrate and get electrolytes in. There are different blocks and sport jelly beans that they generally provide between 50 and 100 calories per serving, and it's really just to keep those energy stores topped off. But I've known some people who they'll wear their fuel belt during the race, and they'll actually pack in some solid food, maybe such as a banana, and they'll take little bites of a banana, which has potassium and electrolytes in it, and some calories that are going to just keep your energy level sustained during the race. And those, for some people, will sit better than gels, sports drink, or beans. I've known people to cut up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich into small little bites and have that along the course. So it's really individual. It's one of those things you really want to experiment with on your long runs and your tough workouts before the race. But generally, I think you want to drink something about every 20 minutes or so. Water will work well for most people, and you want to do it in small increments. So it's better to drink 4 ounces at a time, 5 times throughout the race than trying to throw down 10 ounces or 20 ounces at once. So definitely staying on top of your hydration is key, regardless of how fast you're going, especially on a warm day. And then as far as actually taking in calories, it's really going to depend on how long you're out there and what your stomach can tolerate.
Well, that segues nicely into our next topic, which actually is hydration. And I'm gonna throw a little curveball in here, Mario. We actually just got an emailed question that's perfectly suited for. We talked about the morning of the race, and we're talking about hydrating right now. So let's talk about hydration. But also, here's a question from Colleen. She says, "I like coffee on normal days to wake me up, but doesn't coffee dehydrate you?
Coffee itself doesn't dehydrate you. Coffee itself, you've got to remember, is mainly consisting of water. So that's gonna help hydrate you. What it does, however, is it will cause you not to really be thirsty, so you're not inclined to drink anything else besides that coffee, and it will cause you to use the bathroom more frequently, which is going to dehydrate you. So the key is, if you're going to have coffee, it's one, not to overdo it. You really don't need more than a cup, 2 max, in the morning if that's part of your normal routine. But 2, making sure that you're also drinking water and sports drink along with that, so that coffee is not your sole means of getting fluid into your body. And the main thing to remember about being hydrated too is hydration starts. Hydration is not a one-shot thing. Hydration, especially before a race, it starts in the days before the race, like 3-4 days out. You've really got to be drinking water and juices and water-based drinks regularly. And not just water. You want to make sure that your drinks also have sodium in them, so that you're not completely flushing all that out of your system. But hydration starts in the days before a race. It's an ongoing thing. So it's I always say you want to try to have a water bottle at arm's length pretty much at all times. So that, as I said, during the race, it's best strategy is to drink a few ounces at a time frequently. And it's the same thing throughout the day and the days before the race. It's like, have a water bottle close to you, have sports drink close to you, be sipping it regularly, so that you're really maintaining those hydration levels. So it's like you want to go into the race, with your tank already full. You want to be well hydrated before you step on the starting line. And then what you drink during the race, it's more to keep those levels sustained than it is to really, hydrate from scratch. You should already be you should already be well hydrated before you start. And same deal goes in training. It's don't carry 32 ounces of water with you, and that's going to be how you hydrate. It's like if you're already in a hole before you start, that's not going to help you all that much.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you, again, very consistently, Mario, is you don't want to surprise your body on race day. You want to do everything you can to make sure that in your training, not just that your body is used to physically running the distance, but that it's physically used to all the other aspects of what goes into actually running a race.
Absolutely. Whether it's hydration, nutrition, the shoes that you're wearing, the pace that you're running, the clothes that are on your back, you definitely don't want to do anything different on race day. I look at it as race day is it's your grand finale. It's the big show. Everything that you do before that, all your long runs, all your key workouts, it's a dress rehearsal. That's where you want to work out the kinks. If you're going to learn that, a certain sports drink doesn't sit well in your stomach, it's better to learn that, 4 weeks out from the race, during one of your long runs than on race morning. If you've got a new pair of shoes, it's better to know 3 weeks out from the race that they're rubbing your toe in the wrong spot and not on race morning. So, look at your practice sessions, your long runs, as dress rehearsals in every regard, as far as hydration, nutrition, pacing, equipment, and all that stuff, so that when you step on the line on race day, regardless of whether you're competing up front or you're just trying to finish for the first time, you're not worrying about if something's going to go wrong. You're pretty confident that everything that you've done to this point is going to set you up to achieve your goal.
Fantastic. Wanted to quickly touch on, before we get out of the nutrition section, just briefly, Mario, can you go into kind of the things that we should be doing after the race? And we're going to transition nicely from this actually into the importance of recovery. So this is a related topic. But after the race, what can I eat a Big Mac, or should I stick with the salad on the screen?
You can eat a Big Mac. Personally, after I finish a marathon or half marathon, I just want a burger and fries, and that's sort of my reward, and it's okay to do that. But immediately after the race, within a half hour, you definitely want to start the refueling process, which is kickstarting the recovery process. So, I recommend that's when you want to get on the fluids. You want to continue drinking, even though you've been drinking during the race. But that's the part. This is now where you can, instead of just sipping 4 to 6 ounces of fluid at a time, you can get a bottle of sports drink or a recovery shake that ideally is in a 3-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein. That's going to help kickstart the recovery process, start repairing damaged muscle tissue, replacing calories, and really setting you up nicely to recover well from the race. So that's within the first half hour to an hour after the race. And then 2 to 2.5 hours later, when your stomach is settled down, so a lot of people, myself included, right when I cross the finish line, I'm not ready for a big meal, but you definitely need a little something. Save that big meal for 2.5 hours after the race. I recommend strongly that it's a protein-based meal. That's going to help repair damaged muscle tissue. Certainly want to get some carbohydrates in there to start replenishing those glycogen stores, which have run pretty low. But that's generally in the 2.5 hour range, and that's a full meal. And reward yourself. This is whether you're finishing a race for the first time or you just smashed your personal best. Celebrate it. You've been diligent with your nutrition, ideally in the build up to the race, and you've done everything right. This is your celebration. This is sort of your time to just really recognize your achievement and enjoy a good meal, such as a burger and fries.
Fantastic. We wanted to quickly go into transition now into the importance of recovery. And I know we've got a lot of questions in the back end of this presentation, and I know that a lot of folks are interested in injury prevention and warm weather tactics. So if we could, let's just quickly cover this recovery section, though, because it is really important to making sure that not only do you run well, but that you can kind of come back the next day or the next month or the next race and run well. So in terms of day-to-day, what are the couple things that we should be thinking about in terms of just what do I do after my day-to-day training to make sure that I'm properly recovering and ready for the next day?
Yeah, after a run or after a long run or a workout or even a tune-up race, you really want to start that recovery process as soon as possible. And we talked about how you can do that from a nutritional standpoint, and all those same rules apply after your biggest workouts or your long runs or just a hard training day. First thing I like to do is get my shoes off. I've been in my running shoes for a while. I like to take them off my feet, just kind of give your feet a chance to, expand and recover in that way. But I'll put on something that's supportive, such as a Birkenstock sandal, or, there are even recovery sandals now that are built on a fairly firm footbed, which, when your feet are fatigued, you want to make sure there's something underneath them just so that they're able to recover, and you're giving them a break too, because the reality is we're on our feet a lot, not just when we're working out, but when we're walking around afterwards. So your feet are probably they're definitely taking a bigger beating than every other part of your body. So I like to get a supportive pair of sandals on. Compression gear, especially in the last few years, has become a key recovery tool, and there are studies that kind of go either way on whether or not they benefit performance or they benefit recovery. The fact is what they do is, because they're so tight, they are going to encourage blood flow. And anytime that you can get blood flowing to a fatigued or an injured area, it's going to speed the recovery process. So I like to throw on, especially if I'm traveling to and from a race and I'm about to get on a flight home, I'll put on my recovery socks or a pair of recovery tights. It feels good. It really kind of gets blood flowing. It helps flush out a lot of the crap that's built up in your legs over the course of a race or a hard workout. And it doesn't guarantee that you're going to feel 100% the next day, but you'll likely be less sore than you would under other circumstances. And then the other thing too is making sure that after your long runs and your hard workouts, that you really are resting and recovering and trying to absorb that training. Life gets in the way, and we've all got a million things to do, but to take an example from professional runners, and granted it's their job, it's after they're done training for a day, they do their best to get off of their feet. And one of the anecdotes that I've heard is, don't stand if you can sit, and don't sit if you can lay down. And I think it's not always possible for us to do that all the time, but you want to make sure that you really recovery is just as important as, or more important than, the workout itself. When you're at rest is when you're absorbing all the work that you've done. So on a daily basis, making sure that you're getting a good amount of sleep at night. If you can sneak in a nap on the weekends, that's great too. And just generally staying off your feet and giving your legs a break when you have a chance is super important in helping you to feel better for the next day's workout.
Great. And in the interest of time, Mario, I'm going to go ahead and skip right, kind of take going from this micro view day to day, going to skip past week to week, which is also a very important part of the recovery process, but going to go right to the post-race recovery process. Is there any ways the post-race process is different than the recovery process for kind of my individual, my regular day-to-day training runs?
Well, the day-to-day stuff definitely applies, but after a race, which is, as we said before, the culmination of 8 to 12 to 16 weeks of hard, focused training where, you're increasing your weekly mileage and you're bumping up your long runs and you're doing these new types of workouts, and you're really just, throwing a load on your body, which is, it's part of training. That's what you need to do. When the race is over, especially if it's sort of your A race for the year, or if it's not, if it's not a half marathon in preparation for a marathon, if it's the end of your training cycle, making sure that you give yourself a chance to detrain. And, runners tend to be type A by nature and, always feel like they should be training. But, it's important after a long block of training to, take a couple weeks, either off or easy, and really just give your body a break and give your mind a break. So you want to give yourself that physical and mental relief just from the obligation of getting out every day to do a workout and adding on your run, because it's, yes, it's enjoyable, but it can be a chore if it's, been so focused for months. So it's, it's important that after a race, I recommend after, say, a 12 or 16-week block of training, you take a 1 to 2 weeks of downtime, it's active recovery. You're not just totally sitting on your butt, but you reduce your volume. You're going out and you might go for a jog or you might run, but you're not training per se. They're not obligatory workouts. You're just going out to be active and get blood flowing. You might do something different, cross-train, get on a bike, get in the pool, go for a walk, go for a hike. Do all the things that give yourself a chance to do the things that maybe you couldn't do when you were full-on training. And then after a couple weeks of that, and you started to think about the next goal, you can kind of get back into that routine and back onto that schedule and start focusing on adding in your workouts and getting your long run up and increasing your mileage and all that stuff that goes along with preparing for an event.
Terrific. We're going to go into injury prevention strategies now. This is something that I know a lot of folks were interested in when we had the poll at the beginning of the webinar. So getting into this, Mario, the first thing you say in terms of preventing injuries is just to get stronger.
Yeah, you definitely want to get stronger. I mean, running is a really efficient activity. It's easy to throw your shoes on and head out the door for a half hour to an hour and get a great workout in. And there are tons of benefits to that, on the cardiovascular level. And, especially if you're new, you're going to develop muscle strength. But, running, you're generally only moving in one plane of motion. And a lot of runners are creatures of habit. They'll run the same loops over and over again. They'll do the same types of workouts. But you want to get stronger. So I encourage runners, especially new runners, the first thing you want to do is, yes, you want to become a better runner, but you want to become a better athlete. And part of becoming a better athlete is getting stronger all around. Whether that's, an easy way to do that is to partake in a full body strength routine a couple times a week, or I encourage people, if you don't have 2 45-minute slots a week to strength train, just do 5 to 10 minutes a day. That adds up over the course of a week. But the stronger that you are from head to toe, the better athlete that you are, the less likely you are to become injured. The more you can get out of yourself as a runner, the stronger you are, the faster you're ultimately going to be. The quicker you can progress your training because you're just overall like a solid athlete. So this guy in the picture, it's a little extreme. He's definitely like the caveman, but the stronger that you are, the better athlete that you are, the more injury resilient you're going to be, and the more potential you're going to have as a runner to break through and improve.
We're going to move on to the next section here, add variety in terms of preventing injury. Mario, what do you have to say about that?
Variety is can be a lot of things. You want to have variety in your training. You want to have variety as far as the surfaces that you run on. As I said with the last slide, runners are creatures of habit. So you run the same loops over and over again. You might run on roads all the time. And switch up the surfaces that you run on. You know, you're going to work an entirely different set of muscles when you're running on grass or soft surfaces than you do when you're running on hard asphalt. So, you know, variety as far as where you train, variety in the types of workouts that you do. You know, if you run the same pace every day, you know, eventually you're going to plateau, and it's going to be really hard to break through and achieve a higher fitness level. So, you know, I encourage new runners especially, you know, yes, you want to build a, you know, a base and gradually increase your mileage, but, you know, it's also important to run at a variety of different speeds. You know, running, you know, there's time to go out and run, you know, easy for prolonged periods of time. You want to run medium pace on some days, you know, sustained effort. And then there's some days you want to run fast. And what that's going to do, it's going to force you to run differently in a way. Your mechanics are going to change depending on how fast you're running. And, you know, that's kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. That's going to help you become a better, more well-rounded athlete and runner, make you more resilient. But also beyond just running and where you run and the types of workout that you're doing, I think it's important to throw in, you know, some strength training, some cross training, because those things are going to help work some of the different physiological systems that running doesn't touch on. You know, we have an example of yoga here in the picture, and that's, you know, that can help a lot of things from flexibility to, you know, concentration, and you know, those things are going to ultimately, they all come back to helping you become a better runner. So, you know, variety, you know, the saying goes, variety is the spice of life, and variety is also the key to making you a more well-rounded, more complete athlete, which is going to help you become a better runner.
Fantastic. And in the interest of time and getting into some of these great questions, we are going to move on past the preventive maintenance routine, which is really important. We have a lot of great content on here. We may end up doing another webinar about some of the stuff in the future. But Mario, the real reason that the people came here was to find out about warm weather tactics. And this was certainly what the majority of folks are most interested in, and it's what people training for Virginia Beach are curious about, because it's often a hot and humid environment. So let's get into some of these warm weather tactics now, and then after that we will go into Q&A. A lot of great questions have come in.
Okay, that sounds great.
We'll try and get to as many of them as we possibly can. So warm weather tactics, Mario. First thing you say, adjust your expectations.
Yeah, it's super important to, you know, realize that warm weather conditions are going to have an effect on your race. And a lot of people don't want to accept that. They say, oh, well, this is my goal, and I'm gonna go after it from hell or high water. And the key is to be smart, because if you don't adjust your expectations as far as, you know, your pacing or your finishing time or how much fluid you need to consume, it could really backfire on you. So, you know, for example, if you're going to Virginia Beach and it's, you know, race morning, it's 82 degrees out and humid, and your goal pace that you've been training at is 8-minute pace for the half, and you've been doing that in, you know, 65, 70 degree weather, dry weather, where you've been training, you've got to realize that it's going to be a lot harder, to require a lot more effort to do that in hot, humid conditions. So, you know, while it may be disappointing to accept, like, okay, well, maybe 8-minute pace isn't going to happen today, if you can, you know, you can adjust your pacing guidelines by anywhere from 15 to, you know, 45 seconds, depending on how extreme it is, you know, you're going to set yourself up to run strong from start to finish, whereas if you try to go out and run that 8-minute pace when conditions are terrible, you know, the heat and humidity are going to have an effect. They're going to wear you down, and you know, you blow up 6 miles into the race, and, you know, you're really shuffling home. So, you know, it's important to realize that anytime the temperature is going to be over, say, I've read different things, 60, 65 degrees, you know, that you adjust your pace accordingly. The warmer it gets, the more hot and humid it gets. You know, you want to dial back your pace accordingly, 15 to 45 seconds, depending on the day. It's kind of like altitude. You know, a lot of people go to altitude, and, you know, because there's less oxygen, you have to run, you have to run slower or you're going to wear yourself out quicker. And there's no official like humidity or heat conversion, but same principle applies. You want to dial back the pace, your goal race pace, just to make sure that you can still run strong from start to finish. And the same thing applies in training. If you're going to head out for a long run or workout and you have a target pace in mind, really focus on your effort level. Heart rate monitors are a great way to do that because they let you see exactly the effort that you're putting out. So it's key to adjust your pace and your effort for the conditions. If it's warm out, realize you're going to have to drink more. If you can go out and do an hour-and-a-half long run in ideal conditions and not have to drink a whole lot, when it's hot and humid out, your sweat rate's going to increase, your core body temperature is going to be a lot higher. So it's important that you're kind of keeping your temperature regulated and you're getting in fluids at a consistent pace. So it's important to adjust your expectations for the weather because it's the hotter and more humid it gets, the more it is going to affect what you're able to do out there.
And here's something that another thing that you say is to avoid the middle of the day, which obviously is a big component in working with the weather, trying to work around the worst parts.
Yeah, it just takes care of itself on race day. Most races, start very early, but from a training perspective, from June till say September, depending where you are, most areas of the country are really warm. The middle of the day is obviously the hottest part of the day. The sun's at its strongest. And it's really going to take a lot out of you. So if you want to get the most out of your workout and really have the least amount of risk as far as when you head out, it's better to go early or late so that the sun's not beating down on you. Temperatures aren't quite as high, and you can really just get more out of your workout. And it's just safer. It's a lot safer to head out early or late than it is in the middle of the day. And again, it's not always possible for everyone depending on your schedule, but if you can adjust your schedule so that you can get out early or save your workout for later in the day because it's safer and then you can get more out of it.
We're going to go to one of my favorite slides. Drink, but be wary, you say, Mario. And here's a guy who's certainly taking drinks of water with reckless abandon.
Yeah, this is a little over the top, but it proves the point really well. As I said, in adjusting your expectations, you also have to realize when it's warmer out, your sweat rate increases and your body temperature goes up. So, best way to address both of those things is to drink frequently. But you want to be wary because you don't want to be drinking, just water. Your blood is made up of mostly water, but there's also sodium in there, and that's super important. And if you're drinking just water, what you can really do is it's almost like diluting the sodium content of your blood, and that's when people get into trouble, and it takes a lot to get there. But, you want to make sure that you're keeping your sodium levels in check. So, you want to drink, but you also want to make sure that you're replacing sodium and other important electrolytes through either sports drink or, people munch on pretzels or they have a banana or, electrolyte chews or something along those lines so that, because when you sweat, you're sweating out much more than just water, so you want to make sure that you're replacing more than just water so that you can keep your blood healthy and you can keep your body temperature at an optimal level.
Great. We want to go through these last two rather quickly because we do want to get to as many questions as we can. But very important, obviously, to skincare is covering yourself up.
Yes, I advise people who are running in warm weather environments, it's like you want to have every inch of your body covered in some way, and that doesn't mean that it has to be all closed, but whatever is exposed skin, definitely put on sunblock that is anywhere between 30 and 50 SPF on most of your body. I like to use 70 on the face, but almost like making sure that you have like a mask on of sunblock, or that you've got like a second skin of sunblock on any exposed skin, really to mitigate the effects of harmful UV rays. But I also advise folks, wear a hat, cover your head. A couple weeks ago I was out, for most of the day in warm weather, and I forgot to wear a hat on my head, and I got sunburn through my hair, and that's possible. So it's like make sure you cover your head. You want to protect your eyes with sunglasses that are going to help, cut down on that glare. But also, I've been known, and I've advised people to wear, like this woman is here, if it's a warm day out, you can wear a lightweight, long-sleeve shirt that covers your arms. There are a lot of pieces of apparel now, especially shirts and hats, that have SPF protection built into them that will help protect you from the sun. So, making sure that that you're covered, whether it's by clothing or sunblock, because nobody wants to get skin cancer. It's a nasty, nasty thing, and it's totally preventable.
Absolutely. And finally, keep your cool. We mentioned drinking, we mentioned keeping yourself covered up, but any other ways to kind of make sure that you stay cool on these hot days?
Yeah, especially during the race. Water can be very good when it's on you. Definitely want to get it in you as well, and that you're drinking at regular intervals throughout the race. But dumping water over your head can really help cool yourself down. You've got to think of think of your body like you would your house in the summer. You want to keep your house at a comfortable, say, 72 degrees. So you have to. A lot of times you have to cool it down by putting on the air conditioning or opening some windows or something like that. So think of your body as the same way. As you're running, your body generates a lot of heat, and your core body temperature is going to go up, and there is danger of overheating, just like a car on the side of the road. So making sure that you're drinking enough fluids, because that's going to help keep your body temperature down. Throwing fluids on your body. And just generally, again, adjusting your expectations so that you're not heating up too much, and then, like I said, you blow up and you're on the side of the road because, you're so hot and you just can't keep moving. So yeah, definitely want to keep it cool, by taking in fluids regularly, dumping fluids on you, and if you're in training, ideally looking for shade and trying to avoid exposure to direct sunlight if you can.
Great. Wanted to get into questions now, because this is called Ask Mario after all. As I said, all attendees are in listen-only mode, but if you'd like to chat your question, you can just type it in the questions box of your GoToWebinar control panel, and you'll see a place to ask questions there. A lot of great questions have come in via that box. We've also had questions that have been emailed in, so let's get right into this. Here's a question from Nathan. Nathan asks, would you advise for or against a professional massage the afternoon after a half marathon? So in terms of recovery, professional massage, good idea?
A lot of races, there will be massage tables set up in the recovery area, and you can get anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes with them. The important thing is whether you go there or you get a professional massage later in the day, it's that they don't go too deep. After a half marathon, your body undergoes a lot of muscle damage. There's going to be inflammation. That's totally, it's totally normal. It's totally a natural response to, to putting in some effort. And your legs are going to feel, they're going to be full of junk and different waste products. So a massage can help, a gentle massage, I should say, called a flush. It's going to help flush some of that stuff out. Really similar to what we talked about earlier with recovery compression products, get some blood flowing. But the key is letting your massage therapist know that, hey, I just ran a race this morning. Don't go too deep into my muscles, which are already beat to crap. Take it easy on me. I just need a flush. Gentle massage just to kind of increase that blood flow and start removing waste products. But avoid any kind of deep tissue massage or anything that's too intense right after a race.
Great. Another question is it okay to stop and run multiple times during the race? I feel like I'm out of energy very soon during runs. So I guess this person is asking, is it okay to stop and start kind of while you're in the midst of a race?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to do what's best for you out there. I encourage a lot of newer runners who aren't entirely sure if they can finish 13 miles without stopping. It's like, walk through the water stops. A lot of races such as rock and roll, they're every mile or at worst every other mile. So there's a lot of opportunity there, to really stop, walk through the water station, get get your nutrition, get your hydration, and keep going. But it also gives you a chance to catch your breath, sort of reset yourself, and get yourself ready to run again. Just be aware of those around you. You don't want to come to a sudden stop and get in someone's way who's going full steam. But if you know you're coming to a stop, look around you. Look for a place where you can step off to the side, stretch, drink, do whatever you need to do. Then keep going. But it's especially if you're a newer runner, or if it's a hot day, if that's what you need to do to safely get yourself to the finish line, by all means stop and do what you need to do. But just be courteous of those around you, and be aware that there are thousands of other people out there who are trying to get to the finish line as well.
Great. We had a question from LJ about how to adequately train for the weather and humidity when you don't necessarily live next to a beach. So is there a way to kind of simulate or kind of train for really humid conditions if you might not be in those exact conditions when you're doing your training?
There is, and you want to be careful as well. A lot of the better runners that I work with, if we're preparing for, say the Boston Marathon, which is totally unpredictable as far as weather goes. You can get an ideal day, or you can get a day that's really hot and humid, similar to Virginia Beach, and they're training over the winter. We'll put on multiple layers. So we'll head out with more clothes than we ordinarily would. maybe 2 long sleeve shirts, or whatever it happens to be. But keeping in mind too, that's going to cause you to sweat more. It's going to cause you to heat up a lot quicker. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to your hydration, especially, and as we talked about earlier, keeping yourself cool when you're doing that. But if you're not in a warm weather environment, you can always add layers to sort of simulate what you might face on a hot, humid day like in Virginia Beach. It'll never be an exact match, but if you can get yourself in a position where you're used to being warm, and you can practice cooling down, that will better prepare you than if you were to go in totally blind.
Great. We have another question. It's a very simple question. Shin splints. Any tips for dealing with shin splints?
Shin splints are a common running injury for especially new runners, but experienced runners can deal with them as well. And the key is first to evaluate why you might be getting shin splints. If you're a new runner, the stress of running and the pounding of putting the miles on your legs, are going to cause things to get sore. So, if your shins are getting inflamed and it's just a minor thing, make sure that you're definitely icing after runs. Taking days off if you need to. But a lot of people can get shin splints when they especially training for half marathon or full marathon is when they start increasing their mileage, whether it's just a long run or even they might be running a few more days a week, and it's just more of a stress on on the body. Your lower legs are going to take a lot of those initial impact forces, and that's it's important to address that. So one is making sure to keep an eye on your running shoes. Make sure that they're fresh and they're not too worn down. Number two is strengthen your lower legs. We didn't really get into it because of time today, but as we talked about getting stronger, becoming a better athlete, doing some simple exercises that are going to help, get your feet stronger, get your shins and those muscles, your calves stronger, so that they can handle, more increased training load, and then also some flexibility. A lot of runners will have tight lower legs and tight calves, and the tighter that your calves and your shins are, the more you're gonna the more that you're gonna feel that. So making sure that you're pretty mobile in your lower legs, paying some attention to that every day. But shin splints is a very generalized term, and it could be anywhere from just tight muscles in your shins to annoying pain, or it could be really sharp and could be something to do with the bone and be a stress fracture. So don't ignore them. Definitely try to address them. Icing, stretching, strengthening, paying attention to your shoes. But if it's really bad or if it persists for a while, go see a physical therapist who works with athletes. Let them evaluate you, and there are many different things that contribute to shin splints, but let them take a thorough look at you and help you identify what might be causing them, and then what you can do to address that.
Perfect. Here's a question. It's an interesting question. Is it okay to run the whole course, 13.1 miles, a few days before the race, or is that going to cause performance issues?
For most, that's going to cause performance issues, especially newer runners who are just trying to finish for the first time. Generally, if you're targeting this race and it's sort of your A race for the year, that week before the race, you're really dialing back the volume and the intensity a bit. Maybe some of the most experienced runners who are running really high mileage regularly can go out a few days before the race and preview the course and do it, and they'll be okay. But for most runners, especially new runners, a few days before, I wouldn't advise going out to do it. Maybe 2 weeks before for sure. A week out for intermediate, advanced level runners. Yes, you could get away with doing like an easy run on the course just to preview it. But once you're inside those 7 days, for most runners, there's really not a need to go out and knock out 13 miles at a time.
Great. Folks are asking about whether or not these slides will be available or if this presentation will be available. We are recording this presentation, and it will be eventually made available as a video, so you'll be able to hopefully share that with your friends or other people who are interested in this great information. So we have more great content and more great questions coming in. We've had some questions about this. One person's asking about whether it's fair to use an elliptical machine to train instead of actually running. Let's say if it's raining or there's inclement weather outside, instead of training outside, training on an elliptical. And someone else was asking about training on a treadmill. How do you look at that kind of a training as it relates to the overall picture?
You could definitely use an elliptical machine as part of your cross training. It allows you to get in a good aerobic workout without beating on your body quite as much as running. But you have to remember that on race day, you are going to be out running 13 miles on the road. So it's important at points of your training that you do get outside and you really do harden your legs to what they're going to face on race day. But on a rainy day or an inclement weather day where it's in some cases could be dangerous to be outside running, getting on a treadmill will allow you to get your run in without having to deal with some of the obstacles outside. But getting on an elliptical as well can be a great way of getting in a recovery workout and taking some of, if you've just done a long run a couple days before, or a really hard workout, the elliptical or spin bike or getting in the pool can allow you to get in a good aerobic workout without, the pounding on your body that running has. But, it's all about balance. It's important too that if you are going to be racing a road half marathon, that you do get out, a couple times a week and you're on the roads and allowing your body to, get used to what it's going to be like to run on asphalt for a prolonged period of time.
Absolutely. Great. Well, the other questions, one of the questions that we're getting goes back to nutrition, and this is, I believe, Christina asking, what should we eat the night before the race? So we talked about the morning of the race. What about the night before? Christina asks, is it true that we need to, quote, pasta load? In other words, eat a lot of pasta the night before.
That is probably one of the biggest fallacies of sports nutrition that exists. It's not bad to eat pasta the night before the race, but you really don't need to go overboard with it. If you ordinarily would have a plate of pasta before the race, a plate of pasta is probably going to be fine. You don't, especially for the half marathon, you don't need to double your pasta consumption or, add some potatoes on top of your pasta or really overdo the carbohydrates. So, if you do, chances are you're going to feel really full and sluggish and not feel so great the night before. But similar to breakfast, you want to have a carbohydrate-rich meal, yes, but do you need to eat significantly more calories or more pasta than you would any other night before a long run? No. And again, go back to your training. Think about your long runs that you do on the weekends when you get out there on a Saturday or Sunday morning, to go run, 10, 12, 14 miles. And think about, I encourage people, write in your log what you had the night before. and how you felt the next day. You know, if you felt really energized during that run, look back at what you had the night before for dinner. You know, take notes on how, you know, how it sat in your stomach. You know, if it gave you any trouble or not. But, you know, you really don't have to. A lot of people will get into trouble and they'll overdo it, feeling like, okay, I really need to load up on carbohydrates the night before. Similar to hydration, that starts in, you know, the 2 to 3 days before a race, that you're, you know, that you're eating, you know, a good amount of carbohydrates at regular intervals, but you don't need to ever overload at one time. You know, that's more likely to make you feel sluggish and too full than it is to make you feel energized.
Great. We're knocking down the sports nutrition fallacies here on this Rock and Roll webinar. We have one more question left. We have about 60 seconds left, Mario, before we wrap up. This last question is from Peter. Any thoughts on recovery devices like the Stick or Moji 360? You mentioned not having a massage therapist go deep right after a race, but what about using tools like those?
Yeah, same principle applies, especially with the Stick or a foam roller. You know, the nice thing about the Stick is it's up to you how deep you want to go. And after a race or a hard workout where your legs are beat up, you definitely don't want to go too deep. But yeah, those recovery tools can come in really handy after hard efforts or races. But the key is not to go too deep into your muscles. Yeah, but really just use them as, you know, I love the word flush. You know, you're just trying to flush stuff out of your legs and, you know, kickstart that recovery process. You're probably still going to be sore the next day, but if you could start that flush, you know, after the race, you're going to feel significantly better than if you just, you know, if you just finish the race and stand around and don't do anything.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank Mario Fraioli for your time today and for answering all those questions and for giving us such awesome information. As I said, this webinar will eventually be made available as a video online, and we will certainly let folks know where to find that. After the webinar, you'll see a survey that just lets us know how we did today in the webinar. Please go ahead and take that. I think it's a one-question survey rating the webinar 1 to 5. So please go ahead and take that. And thank you very much. This has been a presentation of Competitor Group and the Rock and Roll Marathon Series, reminding everybody that the Virginia Beach Half Marathon is Sunday, September 1st. And so we're looking forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar today. And we will see you out on the course. Thanks, Mario.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, for attending.